Hello, and welcome to the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Rosemary Gattuso, and she is a trauma-informed family mediator, couples counselor, and author of It's Not You, It's Me, a Chronic Overthinker's Guide to Self-Reflection. With over 15 years experience in family mediation and restorative justice, she supports families through separation with a respectful child-focused approach. She has advanced training in mediation from Harvard and serves on panels for the Defense Force Ombudsman, the National Redress Scheme, and the Territory Stolen Generation Scheme. Rosemary blends neuroscience, trauma-informed practice, and lived experience to show how overthinking can be reframed as a strength and a pathway to resilience. She has delivered workshops for schools, businesses, and mental health settings, and has spoken on ABC radio, podcasts, and to first responders and the U.S. Defense Force. Her book, It's Not You, It's Me, a Chronic Overthinker's Guide to Self-Reflection, has been endorsed by Professor Stephen Porges and Petria King. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really great to be here and have this chat with you. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes, of course. I'm so happy to have you. And before we dive into our conversation for today, what are 3 things that you can't live without and why?
Oh, that's a good one. 3 things I can't live without. I know this is a hot topic, but I can't live without my phone. I'm sure a lot of people, it's sort of a love-hate relationship. I can't live without my kitchen. I know that sounds a bit strange, but I just have a lot of nice memories and enjoy cooking and being there and everything that it sort of revolves around that space. And I can't live without my plants because I really love having plants around me and even
Oh,
just nurturing them, looking after them, and that excitement when they flower and grow. And yeah.
oh, that's so nice. And I definitely relate with the phone. And I just love that the kitchen has so many memories for you. And it's such an interesting thing to hear because the kitchen is more of like a hospitality, like communal space. And so it's nice to hear that you have memories of that. And with plants, I am not good with plants. Like I feel like I feel like I would just like not be good with like watching things grow and actually nurturing it because they end up dying. So I'm like, you know what?
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm just like good without the plants.
Maybe you just haven't found the right plant for you.
Maybe that's a great reframe. So today we're going to talk mostly about your work as a family mediator and also your book, It's Not You, It's Me. But before we get into that, I want to know, can you share more about your own mental health journey and how it influenced your pursuit of a trauma-informed family mediator?
Yes, and it's something that's really central to my professional development and personal development in general, because up until I became a mediator, it was really hard for me to believe in myself. And when I say believe in myself, that is also about self-esteem and confidence. And there's a real sort of a line in the sand in between my life before becoming a mediator and afterwards in terms of my confidence. And I would say that I was a very shy child growing up and then became a very shy adult as well. So And I guess now looking back, I think, well, maybe some of it is my temperament, that I'm quite reserved and calm and just like to sit back and observe things. But also the other half of it was heavily influenced by my low self-esteem and low self-worth. And so that filtered through in all aspects of my life, and also would be heavier because of my tendency to overthink things. Because if you have low self-esteem and self-worth, then the overthinking will revolve around what I've done wrong and how I need to improve. And so, this filtered through into all aspects, but it was also inconsistent because there were some parts of me where I was more confident, where I was able to see my strengths, but then others where I would have repeat patterns and repeat hurdles that kept showing up. And so when I became a mediator, before I was a mediator, I was in the traditional legal setting. And what I found is that that approach emphasized my weaknesses and what I couldn't do because I just wasn't built to be a lawyer.
Mm.
And my strengths were more focused around being a mediator, being able to listen, being able to sit, in a heated topic and be calm and kind of bring that kind of energy that allows difficult conversations to be had. And so
Mhm.
once I became a mediator, I was given more evidence of my strength and what was working well. And that was when I guess my sense of self and my ability to believe in myself skyrocketed.
Yeah,
That reflected my mental well-being.
no, that is amazing. And I love how you were able to make the connection between your own personal battle with low self-esteem and also ways that you can have strength in your career as a family mediator. And I just also love the different avenues that your career took before you actually got to something that highlighted your strengths more than it did your weaknesses. So that's very interesting.
And I think in life for me, I've gotten to where I am and where I need to be by going to the wrong place first. I say the wrong place, but by finding out what isn't working, and then that helped me get onto the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, speaking of your work, what does a family mediator do? And how does being trauma informed actually change the way that you help people?
Mm. And so a family mediator is essentially that third party, independent third party who's not there to take sides or give a judgment, but is there to help guide the conversation. I would work predominantly with parents who are going through a separation and need a little bit of support in working out their roles and responsibilities moving forward. So, how they care for their children, who does what, when, and how. So, it can be a challenging conversation. Sometimes it can be smoother, but it's really being exposed to other people in crisis on a daily basis. And that is really what got me to interested in what it means to be trauma informed, because I could see that there'd be two families with very similar circumstances, but vastly different outcomes. And it was really dependent on their perspective and their approach. And so that got me interested in why people respond the way that they do. And so I found that the presence of trauma can impact the way that we respond to our external stimulus in general. It doesn't have to be a crisis, it's just the way we live day to day. And by knowing that, it really allowed me to sit side by side with clients to match their pace and where they're at and show understanding and respect rather than trying to push them into something that they're not ready for or that it's just not their way of being. And so, what I see then trauma as not necessarily limited to a specific event that causes something, abuse or neglect or whatever. It's more about the impact that a situation or a series of events have on an individual. Because if you go back to my story of low self-worth, I wasn't raised in a family where there was obvious abuse or neglect. And, to some degree, I had quite a privileged upbringing. But my view of myself meant that I was responding to outside stimulus, to the environment, and to comments from a deficit, or the starting point was always, I'm not good enough. And I interpreted everything in that perspective. And then you look at the impact on my life. I wasn't in roles that I enjoyed, and I had low self-worth, very shy, stopping me from doing things. So then I see trauma as the impact that a scenario has, or the external stimulus has, on that individual's quality of life. And so it just helped me to see more meaning behind why people respond a certain way. And I never know, because it's maybe my hypotheses around why things pan out that way, but it just helps to be more compassionate and non-judgmental in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you were able to use the trauma-informed care to sit with the families and actually be in the moment with them. And I can almost imagine what that does for the families in terms of getting to a resolve in the mediation. And as a fellow person who deals with like low self-esteem, I do relate to you in terms of not finding a role that actually fits until you're in a situation where you can be able to do some introspective work and really see, like, okay, what role would actually fit me in terms of my strengths and things that I can offer to the world. And I'm so glad you found that through trauma informed care and family mediation.
Yeah, thank you. I feel quite blessed to be in this position, because I could have stayed where I was and applying for promotions and other jobs and not getting anywhere.
Right.
I guess until I was ready to see what was happening as a clue to where I should be rather than where I think I have to be.
And I know that in your 15 years of experience, you've likely seen people with their emotions heightened, right? And so, what
Yeah.
is your go to strategy for de escalating a room or a conversation where emotions are on high?
Well, then in my role as a mediator, I would meet with each individual in private before coming together. And that's really key, because that's where the preparation takes place. And it's not just for mediation, because if you think about any time you're going to have a conversation that could escalate or could be more challenging, the key is to prepare for it. So that's part of it. But also, then I get to, in that individual session with my client, I get the opportunity to ask them questions about what might happen when they are getting upset or are not managing, so that I know specifically, are they going to become withdrawn? Are they going to start fidgeting more or getting louder or not looking at me? There's things like, some of them are obvious, but sometimes they're not so obvious. So I'll have that conversation so that I know what to look out for. And then also, I'm in charge of the process. So I can decide to have a break at any point in time before things escalate, or sometimes it just happens like that. So let's take a break. And that's also something that you can do in a scenario, having a conversation with someone. Things are starting to get beyond where they should, if it permits, walk away. But again, back to my role, process could be that I have both clients in a separate room and I go from room to room to help alleviate that initial tension, or have a shorter meeting and have it very structured. Today, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. It might be coming up to a special event that needs to be finalized. Let's sort that out and then come back. So, a lot of it is about preparation and also knowing your limits, knowing my clients, whether or not it's in a group or an individual scenario, knowing your limits and what helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the different aspects of preparation that you described, especially with meeting with them privately and then also knowing the different signals of like, okay, this person is getting frustrated. Let's try to have a break and do all of those things. And so I know that in your work, like, is there a specific mediation case that completely changed how you view human resilience?
Look, there is one case that I always go back to that I'm not sure if it's a reflection of resilience, but I'll share it anyway because I think it's one that has been quite important for me and my understanding of the way people work and what it means to show non-judgment as well, and what can happen when you do have that. So I had a scenario where there was one very anxious child in the family, and one parent wanted to involve the child in the negotiations by just asking them, is this okay if we do this? And my training had taught me not to involve the children. You don't ask them directly. And that made me quite anxious. And I really put the session on hold because I was worried about this child not being able to manage and what the impact could be. And if the child said, no, I'm not happy with this, then it would stop the other parent from effectively having an overnight time with their child. So I was sort of tossing this up in my head. Both parents agreed that to have that conversation with their child, just say, hey, is this okay if we start this? Very casual, it wasn't. And it wasn't until I realized that this is how this family have always worked, that this individual child is quite anxious. And so they've made adjustments to make the child's life manageable. And so that that child is able to deal with change. I guess it would also impact his level of resilience, being involved in the process rather than being just told, and even that's a contentious issue in family mediation. But I guess the point for me as a mediator is that until I let go of my own understanding of how things should go and what I thought should happen. And also, I was worried that maybe it could work, but if I told my colleagues that I allowed this to happen, you know, what would they say? And that was also on my mind. And then I thought, well, hold on, every family is different. Every family works in a different way. And if this is what has to happen to build on that individual's family's strengths and make things work, then who am I to stop? I don't know how their family runs day to day. I'm only here for a few hours. I don't know the full system. And I thought, hold on, I'm being so judgmental. I need to show them understanding. How can I show them understanding? And this was sort of going on in my head. And so I allowed it to take place. Nothing bad happened. It allowed that family to progress to the next step in, I guess, the evolution of working as a family, with two households. And it aided that child's sense of self, self-esteem, whatever that individual child needed to be able to move forward in the next step. So there's kind of layers of things there, but that is a case that really stood out for me. And it's really about my judgment of how they should or shouldn't do things that stopped them moving forward. And as soon as I thought, well, hold on, this is the individual family, this is what this child needs. And that could build on not only resilience, but relationship with the other parent, relationship with, even with both parents, to have that trust and ability to move forward together.
Hello again. Before you dive into the rest of today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support and for hitting that play button. If you want to expand on that support, here are 3 ways that you can do so. 1. Leave a review. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, or you would want to share about how the podcast changed your life, you can do so by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. 2. Check out our shop. The Rough Edges shop is a faith-based, women of color-owned online shop where you can get a variety of products from tote bags, journals, t-shirts, and more. 20% of the proceeds go to a mental health organization. So check it out at roughedgespodcast.com/shop. 3. Connect on social media. Rough Edges is on a wide variety of social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and more. If you want to connect outside of listening to the podcast episodes, you can do so on these platforms. If you have any questions, you can check out the episode description or stay to the end for more information. Now, enjoy your episode. Yeah, and I also love how the resilience was like impacted in you because you were able to not only identify the fact that you're having your own preconceived judgments on things, but you were able to let that go and really persevere through in order to get to a resolve where the family was operating in their strengths. So I love that
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it didn't hurt that I had just finished writing my book, and the tool that I refer to has a series of opposites that are used to help gauge, where an individual is on any particular given moment in relation to a scenario. And one of the tools, one of the opposites is judgment and understanding. So I had that in my mind thinking, I'm being so judgmental. How can I show understanding?
And so when families come to you at their absolute breaking point, what is usually the first thing that you do to help them just breathe and lower the tension?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important that, both parents know what their options are, and also, and for me, that's assessing their scenario as individuals and also as a family. So what do they need? And what do they need also involves what do they need to know? Because for most people, it's the first time they're going through this. And in Australia, the laws have changed quite significantly over the last 20 years. So many people have not had exposure to family mediation, which is now a compulsory part of going through separation. So information is key. It's an exchange because I need to know about them as well. It's that exchange of information to help know, well, what other referrals could be made? Do they need legal advice? Do they need housing advice? Do they need advice on what their benefits they could receive? Or even if they have a child with special needs, how can everything be linked in? So it's really about finding out what support could help and linking in with that individual support.
Yes, absolutely. And you are there to kind of bridge the gap between what they need and how they could actually utilize those tools to get to a place of resolve. So it sounds like you are operating as well, you are a mediator, but it sounds like you're
Mhm.
operating as a person who is with them even in the trenches to see what it is that they need to be able to climb out of that pit.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's so, yeah, so true. And sometimes they don't need me. That's also part of it, because mediation is not for everyone. And so there might be a time where, because mediation is not evidence-based, you can say whatever you want, but I'm not a judge. But if it's a scenario where maybe evidence is important for them or for their case or to get the best outcome, then, I could steer them towards a more traditional legal process or even a therapeutic process first. Maybe some form of therapy or counseling, or it could be at the same time.
Okay, that still sounds like you are kind of still bridging the gap between like supportive services, and even though it's not evidence-based, there is like a
Mm.
lot of things speaking towards the resilience work that you're doing. So don't downplay that. That's like very
No,
important.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So you spend your days hearing other people's heaviest stress and family drama. So how do you leave that work at the office so it doesn't spill over into your personal life?
Well, balance is really key to this because I find that when I'm in balance, I can take on a lot. And when I start to feel heavy and drowned and, going towards burnout and overwhelm, then it's time for me to reflect on, well, what am I doing outside of my work and how am I managing that? And yeah, so I have to use what I'm feeling as a clue. Am I feeling heavy or am I feeling light? And then work from there. And I guess some of the things that I do, simple things like going for a walk, journaling, going out, spending time in the kitchen, spending time with my plants, buying more plants, anything that really supports the other side of me.
Yeah, that is so important to create that balance, like you mentioned, because a lot of the times we could get so involved in our work that we don't really see that we need to take a pause and actually maybe it could be participating in rest or doing something that you love. And I love that you mentioned buying more plants because, like, that is
Yeah.
something that is a part of you and something that you love to nurture. And so doing that is very important.
Yeah.
And speaking of self-reflection and overthinking, what is a red flag indicator that our self-reflection has crossed over into toxic overthinking?
Well, it feels heavy. It might sound like judgment, criticism, blame, and that victim approach. Whereas when we're in reflection mode, it feels light. It doesn't really keep us up at night, and it's easier to make decisions about the future. Whereas when we're in overthinking mode, we're sitting in past mistakes, past hurts, what was done to us that has been challenging for us to process. When we're in reflection mode, then we're able to look at our past mistakes as a learning opportunity, to look at wrongs that have been done to us without dismissing them, but with slightly more forgiveness, and then putting the focus on ourselves in terms of what do we need moving forward, or how can we move forward from this rather than be defined by the actions of another.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who writes about chronic overthinking, do you yourself still get caught in those late night thinking loops? And if so, what is your personal go-to strategy to stop the rumination?
Yeah. So, yeah, I definitely am still a chronic overthinker. And I think if I wasn't, I wouldn't have written a book. So it has served me to have this way of viewing the world. I guess the downside is that it can then impact quality of life, that staying up all night ruminating. So for me, part of it is about looking at what I need to do to regain balance, because it's also a clue that I'm out of balance.
Mm.
I mean, it's also something that I would naturally do, but it's about how much it's impacting my quality of life. And if I'm not getting any sleep time and time again, then that's definitely, I'm out of balance. I need to go back into balance. And one of the things that I do daily is meditation, because that's exercise for the brain. It'll help improve the parts of the brains that will aid reflection, and then tone down the parts that aid overthinking and the anxiety part. But at the same time, we go through different stages in life and different experiences. That might mean that if you're naturally an overthinker, you're going to be going through this constant rumination, and then it'll sort of change and go up and down. So it's also about for us not to be hard on ourselves about it, because that's exercising non-judgment, being our own mediator. That can also help. And when I started working as a mediator, the organization I worked for used a strengths-based approach. And the strengths-based theory classifies all thoughts, feelings, and actions as coming under either what's wrong or what's strong. And when we're in overthinking mode, our thoughts, feelings, and actions are going towards what's wrong. Whereas when we're in reflection mode, we're going towards what's strong. And sometimes for me, just having that classification in my mind helps me think, hold on a minute, I'm going down the path of what's wrong. Okay, then sometimes that can be enough. And sometimes it's about reflecting afterwards and saying, oh, I took that path again. I went into judgment, into criticism, into making negative assumptions about the scenario, and it got me really upset. And then I find out it wasn't even true, or I don't find out, but it just caused a lot of hurt and angst when it didn't really have to. It just existed in my own thoughts. And so sometimes that awareness can be helpful, but sometimes it doesn't because of the scenario. And so I'll give you one more tip that I would say, which draws on my legal background, is that I started using the rules of evidence to help tame my overthinking. And what that means is the rules of evidence dictates what can be admitted in court and what can't. And so if what I'm thinking about, there's no evidence for, it wouldn't be admissible in court because there's no witness that saw it or there's no document that verifies it, then it comes under jumping to conclusions, a negative assumption, opinion, or anything like that. Then I try to put less weight on it because if it's not admissible in court, why am I putting so much weight on it and making decisions and jumping to conclusions and being so disappointed when maybe it's not even true?
Hmm. Wow, I like that approach. I really do. I'm gonna try that. Like, just see, would this be admissible in court? And actually go down the avenue of saying, okay, I'm just jumping to conclusions. I'm just going in my own head about things. And I also love the strengths-based approach that you mentioned about, am I thinking about what's wrong or what's strong? And that is something that is easy to remember. And it's also something that can check yourself so that you're not constantly going through that rumination, through that overthinking. And we do get into the habit of overthinking, especially when we're stressed or we're thinking about the future or when we're in transition. And so having that like evidence-based approach that you mentioned, that's really something amazing.
And look, there is an exception to using the rules of evidence, and that's intuition. But I find with myself quite often, I think it's intuition, but it's really a negative judgment. And a clue is that everything that I'm thinking about or feeling or doing comes under the umbrella of what's wrong. Then it could be negative judgment disguised as intuition. So there's no right or wrong. Intuition is a very personal thing, but that's the exception because in law there's always exception to every rule.
That's very true. But at the same time, I think it is very helpful for you to be like, okay, is this something that has evidence, like merit? Is this thought something that I could go back to? And it's important to look at our track record. Like, whenever we feel bad or we feel like, oh, we're in the process of overthinking things, we need to look back sometimes and say, okay, I'm in this moment stressed and feeling down and feeling overwhelmed, but I was able to get through that other thing that I was stressed and overwhelmed about. So I should be able to get through this one. And so when we use our track record as that evidence, we can be able to really push forward and not overthink as much.
That's spot on because it helps us, reframe our narrative of our view of ourselves. And then that helps us see our strengths. Yeah, brilliant. And that's what reflection is about.
Yes, absolutely. And so, speaking of self reflection, I want to talk about your book entitled It's Not You, It's Me. And how often do you find yourself having to stop and look in the mirror and say those exact words to yourself about a relationship?
Oh, quite often because, and it's also my relationship with myself. My relationship with myself, my self-talk, my overthinking, my relationship with others, and all sorts of scenarios. And I find sometimes I think, hold on, I wrote a book about this. I should be able to do this. But some days it's easier, other days not. And I found the other day I was just going for a walk and just thinking about a scenario. It wasn't very trivial, nothing really major. But every single thought that I was having came under what's wrong. And that was enough in itself to just think, oh, hold on a minute. I need to read my book again because I'm just going down the path of what's wrong. It was nothing major, nothing drastic was going to happen, but it just got me in a state of anxiety for nothing. So I just borrowed the strengths-based theory and propose it as a tool to help as a check-in. So it's very regular. At the moment, I've become full-time carer of both my parents, and I use it a lot with them because I found that when I was even talking to myself about my role and how much my life has changed, or even discussing with others, a lot of the thoughts and the discussion was under what's wrong. And then if they heard it, they would feel bad. And then it would impact them. And then they wouldn't ask me for help. And then I thought, hold on a minute, this is really good as a caregiver, because just because they need help, it doesn't mean I, should necessarily be focusing on or highlighting what they lack and what I've lost. So I found it quite transferable in my role as a carer. And I'm just about to release my second book about that.
Oh, that's awesome. And I want to read this one because I'm also a chronic overthinker, and it's something that I've been like kind of struggling with. So when I saw that your book, It's Not You, It's Me, is all about engaging in self-reflection rather than the chronic overthinking, and I love the title because it sounds like the classic breakup line, like it's not you, it's me.
Yeah.
And in the context of that and your book, how does embracing that phrase actually empower a reader to reclaim control over their mental narratives?
Well, it's about control and empowering someone. So rather than being stuck in a past scenario or even a past version of ourselves, then if we are able to step back and put the spotlight on ourselves and contribution and what we can do moving forward, what we can learn from it, and what it shows us about ourselves, rather than because when we're in sort of blame mode or we're putting the spotlight on someone else. It's a missed learning opportunity, but a missed opportunity for empowerment and growth because the focus is on someone else. It's about putting the focus back on ourselves, which, sometimes can be more challenging because it's also about taking responsibility. And then where there has been significant trauma and harm done, then what I'm proposing might feel like 2 steps forward, 10 steps back, or it might be, and even trauma, I see it as interactions that focus on what's wrong or interactions that make an individual more likely to see what's wrong in themselves. So then the reflective process and reflection through a view of strengths can be a lot harder, especially when you've been wronged by someone.
Mhm.
Because, and I'm not trying to minimize, but it can come across that way because it's about taking control of the situation and the narrative. What helped me to really see this is to look at survivors of adversity, look at people who might be celebrities or people who I know who had very challenging, incredible abuse, incredible hardship, but they not only overcame, but they triumphed.
Mm.
And my conclusion was that they were able to see their strengths longer than their weaknesses and also focus on their own role and their own possibility and future rather than be defined by the past.
That's beautiful. It's almost like you're taking your power back in a sense because you are flipping it on yourself, but you're actually holding up a mirror to see like what are the things that I am chronically overthinking and how can I be able to take that and reframe the narrative so that way I could be able to move forward in life.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a continual process as well. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not. And I say it's not about being positive 24/7 and staying on the path of what's strong because we learn from the times that we didn't. And sometimes it could even be that the time between that realization and that reflection gets shorter, and maybe at other times in our lives when we've got a lot more going on, the reflection time takes longer. But that's fine, because it's also about showing ourselves compassion and non-judgment and being our own mediator. It's also being trauma informed with ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And what are some lessons that you've learned in writing your book, and how have you seen those lessons impact your life?
Well, the biggest lesson was really about believing in myself, because when I wrote the book and I put out submissions to publishers to go through traditional publishing, I was really waiting for, I guess, someone to confirm that, hey, I've written a good book. And not only confirm that, but they want to invest in it. Because up until then, I didn't really believe it. And then I did get a publisher, and I thought, oh, hold on, maybe I did write a good book. Maybe it is, useful, because someone wants to invest in it. And then I guess through that process, then I thought, hold on, this is my work. There's potential here. I believe in it more. And that didn't go ahead the traditional way, and I ended up self-publishing. But it was like my publishing process mirrored the concepts in the book, because I was focusing on what's wrong. I'm a first-time writer. I don't have much of a social platform. You need a digital platform. You need to be active on social media for someone to take you on and sort of be an influencer. I was focusing on everything that I lacked. And then it wasn't until I thought, hold on a minute, I think this might actually be helpful and it might get somewhere. And I can see myself going on podcasts and being interviewed and doing all the talks and making a thing out of it, that then I thought, oh, hey, I want to self-publish. It's the only way for me to go. And this is how I'm going to do it. So it was really interesting to see my book come to life in the publishing process.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so happy for you that you were able to publish this book, and I think it's going to continue to touch a lot of lives.
No, thank you so much.
Of course. And so, if someone reads the final page of your book and walks away with just one foundational shift in how they talk to themselves on a daily basis, what do you hope that shift is?
Well, it's about self-compassion and to not be so hard on ourselves and judge ourselves, because we have our own journey and we should celebrate our strengths. As you were saying, we will find evidence of what's working and ways that we excelled and triumphed and what our own uniqueness and characteristics show about us. But often we're focusing on the opposite because we remember that more. But this is about everyone is unique, individual, and has their own journey, and to embrace their own.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Rosemary, I'm so happy that we've had this conversation. But before we go, I have one final question for you. What are some uplifting words that you could share with someone who is struggling to manage their mental health?
Hmm. Well, I think hope is a good one, because we can sometimes view our scenario through the lens of despair, but where there's despair, there's always hope. So, what are ways to bring in hope? And what are ways that we've brought in hope in the past? What have we been hopeful for? What can we be hopeful for? I think, yeah, hope can be such a powerful tool to help us get through and crawl out of the trench.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Rosemary, I thank you so, so much. It was an amazing conversation. And where could people find you if they want to learn more?
So on my social media platforms at Rosemary Gattuso, or even on my website where all the links are there, rosemarygattuso.com.
Perfect. I'm going to have all of that in the show notes. And everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more updates on the podcast, you can follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast, or you can visit the official podcast website at roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.